about building a capital market for the future, I mean, I know Tatiana was here before me. This is how we do it now. We send out people to take all the shots, and then I come along and tidy up. I know she did a great job, but I know also from what I hear that we're getting mixed reactions on the delivery of the CMU action plan. If I say that doesn't surprise me, well, it's because I've attended so many of these conferences and I'm hearing pretty much the same thing where I go. So I will try to answer some of these questions that are being raised as I go along. Now, the title of this session is CMU 27 and Friends. I like this title. I like it because it assumes an appropriately optimistic view of how the EU 27 will interact with the United Kingdom, but more importantly with all third countries after the 29th of March. The EU has always been one of the most open economic areas, despite what people might want to say about us, and there's no reason, in my opinion, why that should change fundamentally after Brexit. So I have 10 minutes, so I want to divide my remarks into 3 parts, so they'll be short. In the first part, I want to briefly recall why CMU has been and remains such an important project for the Commission. And when you understand this, then you will understand why we want to keep it open as we go forward. In the second part, I will briefly say what has been achieved so far. I will not repeat Tatiana, so there will be no list of things that we have done or not done. And I also say a few words about why we haven't achieved more. And then the third part, I want to say why the Commission believes that CMU becomes even more important in the context of breakfast, or of breakfast, did I say breakfast? Oh, of Brexit. So why is CMU so important to the Commission? It's because CMU has several objectives that lie at the very heart of the EU economic and financial policy agenda. And while Brexit will be a big shock, the news is that those objectives won't change. The most obvious of these is to boost economic growth and job creation. More integrated and hence more efficient EU capital markets are an essential complement to, and not a substitute for, I should say, a solid banking sector in financing the economy. So in delivering an integrated capital market, CMU can play, in our view, a powerful catalytic role in generating savings and then moving those savings efficiently in support of investment. And due to its positive impact on the economy, CMU is de facto an EU-wide structural reform that boosts productivity and consumer welfare. So we are very fond of this project as a structural reform, and we will remain, as I said, fond, even though Brexit will have implications for how we manage it. The second key objective is to enhance resilience to shocks. Now, in addition to its more obvious allocative role that I've just mentioned, CMU can also enhance economic and financial resilience by diversifying the available funding sources within the EU. If there's anything the last crisis showed us, it was that we were and still are highly bank dependent. So the more we can diversify our funding sources, the more resilient we can be to future shocks. And then in the specific context of EMU, integrated capital markets can widen the opportunities for private risk sharing as a substitute or even complement to public risk sharing mechanisms, most of which, we have to be honest, are prohibited by Article 125 of the treaty. So we need private risk sharing mechanisms to compensate for what we will not have on the public side. I think this financial stability aspect of CMU is often underplayed, but it's one of the main selling points as far as I'm concerned, and this is based on evidence we see from the risk sharing role of the private markets in the United States. So again, this is another objective which will not change after Brexit, and so we still need a CMU. Now, another key objective of CMU is to enhance economic security in an increasingly uncertain geopolitical environment. In his State of the Union address last September, President Juncker highlighted the need for the euro to play a more important role in the global financial system. Now, the objective here is not to rival the US dollar as the reserve currency. Let's be real. However, the objective should be for the euro to emerge further as a viable alternative international currency. And the euro can only be such an alternative if it is underpinned by a developed and dynamic financial system, of which an integrated capital market would be a key element. Here again, I have to say the loss of London is an issue, but it doesn't change the objective that we have for the euro. So I think clearly there's a powerful economic and financial rationale for CMU, and I would say in many ways the future prosperity of the EU and the euro area depends upon it. So let me now turn to how we are doing with implementing the 70+ actions under the CMU project. I'm hoping Tatiana didn't go through the list of 70 actions. I'm not going to go through the list of 70 actions. I'm going to keep you all awake. But it is suffice to say, and I'm sure Tatiana said it as well, that the Commission has delivered on what we promised back in 2015. We have tabled all the legislative proposals envisaged in the CMU Action Plan and the midterm review, and we have worked hard with the co-legislators to conclude their work on these proposals before the European Parliament elections in May. 3 of the proposals are adopted, and political agreement has been reached on several others. But more than half of the legislative files are still under negotiation, requiring further efforts from both the Council and Parliament. And as Nina is not here, I can't blame it all on her, unfortunately. Now, in addition to the legislative programme, the CMU Action Plan has a lot of non-legislative actions. These are all non-legislative measures, but important parts of the CMU project. The Commission is also well advanced in delivering these non-legislative actions before the end of the year. So we feel we're pretty well positioned in terms of what we have done. And for those of you who like to have line-by-line progress reports, I should say that we will issue a communication to the EU heads of state at the end of March, in which we will give you a line-by-line statement on what we are doing. Now, let me just say and come off message a bit and say why we are where we are, but we're not where we are in the end point. The Commission, I always say this wherever I go, capital markets are not built in Brussels, and they're certainly not built in the Commission. We provide enabling tools for capital markets to be built, but those tools have to be enacted by Parliament, put into practice by the Member States, and then used by people in the private sector. So we have delivered our part of the plan, but of course, other parts have not been delivered, at least not yet. We are accelerating into the final straight, I have to say, but we still have quite a number of these proposals to go. And then once we have them on the ground, it will be very important that people in the markets use them. When we launched the securitization proposal, which was supposed to be the low-hanging fruit, you remember this, Jack, from the time of Lord Hill, this piece of low-hanging fruit, which was pretty tightly stuck to the tree, I have to be honest, when we finally got it off, the markets didn't like it. The markets complained about it. It was the best we could deliver. I think you need to use it. If you don't use it, then when we come back to look at it again to improve it, people will say, well, the market didn't want it because the market didn't use it. So please, even if it's not perfect, use it. Now, looking forward, it will of course be for the future Commission to decide on future policies, and I'm not here to prejudice the future Commission, but I'm pretty confident in saying that the Commission will continue to work towards more efficient and liquid capital markets in the EU next time, for all the reasons that I've mentioned in the first part of my remarks. So I guess the question is the glass half empty or is the glass half full? I'm, of course, incredibly biased, but I think it's half full. If the co-legislators manage to conclude their work and do what we ask, and we get all these things adopted before the end of this cycle, I think the new Commission will have a pretty good basis to launch another step of the Capital Markets Union for the next 5 years. And then I want to just turn to the final part of my remarks, because I know I'm under time, and maybe I'll just make a few remarks directly on CMU post-Brexit. There'll be nothing new here, but it doesn't hurt to repeat it. When the Brexit referendum took place, and the result was as it was, there was a considerable amount of uncertainty about whether there would be a continued rationale at all for CMU. People argued that we'd be left with the Union while the capital market moved out. We took a different view. We took the view that the exit of the United Kingdom, in fact, made the rationale for Capital Markets Union even stronger. And there were 2 reasons for this. The first was a mechanical reason, that if you take out the City of London, then the rest of the EU, EU27, is even more bank dependent, just mechanically, than with the EU28. So there's an even greater need to diversify the sources of financing available to the EU economy. In other words, the economic and financial rationale underlying CMU is even more valid after Brexit. Second, Brexit will have inevitable consequences for how financial services are traded between the UK and the EU. The supply of financial services will be different and not as straightforward as they are today. The UK will become extra-jurisdictional from the 29th of March. It will become a third country. And in response, the EU must prepare to develop and integrate our capital markets as part of CMU. And the key driver in those preparations must be ensuring appropriate arrangements for managing financial sector risk at both micro and macro level in a way that is both effective and remains democratically accountable. And I suppose in the specific context of CMU, this means that the EU will probably become more self-reliant, not entirely self-reliant, but more self-reliant, while maintaining continued interaction with the City of London. And here I want to come back to the title of the session, CMU 27 and Friends. We are in favour of global financial integration. We have always been in favour, and we continue to see global interconnectedness as essential for the prosperity of the EU. CMU is and will remain an open project, but within the constraint always of allowing the EU 27 to manage risks to its own financial stability and broader financial sector. And it's in this context of openness, I think, that one should see our proposals, for example, on EMIR 2.2 and on investment firms. I know that in some quarters these proposals have been presented as fragmenting global markets, but in fact the opposite is the case. These proposals have been drafted with a view to managing EU 27 financial risk, and thereby laying the basis for a continued open relationship with the UK and other third countries. You cannot be open if your financial stability is at risk. If your financial stability is managed effectively, you can be open. And I think on that note of openness, I'll conclude by my opening remarks, and let me again thank the organisers for the invitation to the conference, and thank you for your attention. Thank you.